It's the most magical time of the year, and I'm not talking about Christmas. I'm talking about the NFL season. So make sure you're ready with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Get the most live NFL games all in one place. Right now, you can save $85 when you bundle NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube TV. Sign up today at youtubetv.com/Spotify. Device and content restrictions apply. Discount applied to first 4 months of YouTube TV, then $72.99 a month. Ends August 29th. Terms, restrictions, and embargoes apply. No refunds.
We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in the film study, and each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm flying solo on this introduction to the podcast because this is part 2 of a previously recorded interview with Nick Waters and Eric Sidewater of the Philly Film Room podcast. So be sure you're following them on Twitter. Nick is at Philly_filmrooms. Eric is at Eagles X's and O's on Twitter. You can check out their YouTube channel at Philly Film Room on YouTube. If you missed last week's episode, we broke down 2 of the Eagles rookies, Jalen Carter in depth, and then Kelee Ringo. Today we're going to be talking Sidney Brown, Nolan Smith, and Moro Ojomo. So let's throw to that interview now. Jonny, you said last week you would have taken Kelee Ringo at number 30 in the draft. Well, let's talk about the guy the Eagles did take at number 30, Nolan Smith. I don't think there's any way to talk about his rookie season without calling it disappointing. Now, he was a guy that you brought in, you knew he needed some time, but I still think it's probably disappointing that you draft a guy in the first round and he only plays 183 snaps. And so we can start there. He had 85 pass rush snaps, 75 run defense snaps, and then he had, Sean Desai and Matt Patricia were obsessed with dropping him into coverage at times as well, despite him having no clue what to do when he was put there. But he had 15 tackles, 1 sack, 9 pressures. He had a 1.2% sack rate that ranked 73rd among 88 edge rushers, and an 11.1% pressure rate that ranked 52nd. His PFF grades are abysmal. He ranked 87th in run defense and pass rush grade. He was 40th in run defense grade. Jonny, I'll throw it to you first this time. When you look at Nolan Smith, you can talk about what you thought about it in pre-draft, what we saw rookie season, and what do you think his role is going to be in 2024?
Yeah, I wanted to start with this one because I'm not very controversial. I already have hot takes. But I'm going to play sort of a little bit of devil's advocate this time and maybe get you guys to talk me off the ledge. I did not like Nolan Smith as a pass rusher pre-draft. I annoyed everyone on BGN when I said in my film review, I'm not sure if I can see him as a sort of an edge rusher or an off-ball linebacker, and said I might let him do both, and everyone went mad in the comments. They didn't like the word off-ball linebacker next to Nolan Smith. I don't really think I changed my opinion, so I'm going to be a little bit exaggerative here, but essentially this is what I saw when I watched him, and I'm interested to see what Nick and Eric think. I know Shane was probably a little bit higher on Nolan Smith than I was. So based on Twitter, everyone seems to love this guy still. Like when you hear, it's all scheme fit was terrible last year. The guy's athleticism, the guy's talent will win out. And I really, really hope it does. And I think he's obviously a very, very good athlete. I mean, the testing backed that up. I do not see a pass rusher. Like, I didn't see any pass rush moves last year. I didn't see the ability to bend the edge, despite the fact athletically it says he can do it. I didn't actually see it on tape. Most of his pressures were unblocked. I think his sacks were unblocked. He plays very hard. He's very physical. He's got a very high motor, so everyone really, really likes him. But what terrified me was the whole point of Nolan Smith, in my opinion, is versatility. The idea that you can rush, you can drop, you can cover. He couldn't drop. Like, straight up, every snap where Nolan Smith dropped into coverage was a disaster. Like, athletically, he could do it, but instinctively, there was nothing there. Like, he didn't seem to have a clue where QBs were looking. He sort of had his eyes on receivers and the ball's being thrown past him, or he's staring at the quarterback and there's a guy running in like a yard behind him. There was just no natural ability to play coverage. And that's a little bit terrifying for me because I don't think he's going to suddenly wake up and be a brilliant pass rusher. Like, I don't think he's stick him on the edge, let him bend the edge, let him rush quarterback every third and long. I think he has to be a guy who is a bit of an unpredictable chess piece. He's a little bit of sometimes he'll drop. Yes, he can play against the run despite being undersized. And I'm obviously being maybe a tad exaggerative here to prove my point. But I didn't really see anything. Like in preseason, he had that unbelievable play where he ran someone down backside, and you could just see the athleticism, and everyone was like, oh, yeah, here we go. And I thought, right, yeah, I'm going to get this wrong. This guy's going to be a stud, isn't he? And then as I'm watching him more each week, I see the athleticism, but I don't really see a good football player. And that can change. But I'm really interested as someone, and I've not watched any of you guys' stuff on him deliberately because I'm about to write about him, and I don't like to be sort of influenced, I guess, by others. Otherwise, it sort of defeats the objects of what I do. So I'm interested whether you guys saw similar things or whether you think I am way too harsh. So yeah, Shane, whoever you want to start with, I'll throw it to you as hosting me. That was sort of my gut feeling on Nolan Smith. I would say I'm a little bit concerned, basically.
All right, Nick, can you talk Jonny off the ledge, or are you up there with him?
He's a rookie, so I'll give you that. You know, there's room to grow, but I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I talked about looking at real pressure rate and taking out all those unblocked pressures and cleanup pressures. PFF had him 7 of his 8 pressures were either unblocked or cleanup. When you, like you were saying, Jonny, I don't really know what his go-to pass rush move is. Well, I kind of do. It looked like it was a long arm bull rush, which doesn't really fit in with who he is physically, athletically. He should be using more speed rush moves like cross chops, swipe moves. I did a video last year on how he should implement a ghost technique, and he got close to hitting one against the Bills. I think he got held on that play, didn't get called, but I just didn't understand the pass rush game plan that they were having him use, and it was very confusing. So I hope to see better steps towards that, but we have to see that play out on the field. I like you said, Jonny, I don't know if he's gonna overnight. I don't expect him to switch up and all of a sudden he's a superstar. And to be honest, if he doesn't play better, I don't know if he's even going to be third in snaps at this point in time. Brandon Graham was really effective in his limited playing time. And at the end of the day, when the coaches are in the heat of the battle and they need to win a game, yeah, do you like to think about long-term and getting guys some snaps? Yes, but you have to win games, and you're going to put the guys out there that are going to give you the best chance to win the game. And if he doesn't improve a little bit, then I don't know if he's going to get there. Just to look at where his numbers were, of the top 150 rookies and over the past 5 years at the edge position, his real pressure rate was 148th out of 150. There's not a whole lot of players around there that really hit those numbers and then became good players later. There's a few examples. Van Ginkel was a player like that who was very similar to Nolan early in his career, and then he turned it on later. Boye Mafia is a good example from the Seahawks. He had a rough rookie year, really turned it around his next year. So there are examples. And Nolan is an athletic outlier. Some of that stuff that we're talking about, especially in coverage, I'd like to say a lot of it was coaching. And I mean, if you look at the entire defense, they all had issues across the board. So hopefully it's that, and getting with some better coaches can help him. But athletically, he has a lot of the stuff that you want out of a hybrid player. Yes, he's a little smaller, but we've seen players like that succeed. So I hope that we can see him take the right steps. I'd at least like to see a much better pass rush game plan this year. Just all those long arm bull rushes he was using, it just doesn't fit his play style. So I don't know why they kept using it. But so I'm not the guy that's going to be like, yeah, he's going to turn it around this year. I don't know about you, Eric, if you have a better sense on that.
I don't either. I think, sometimes you have, like, he was dealing with the shoulder injury in college, and then also I believe it was the same shoulder he re-injured in the Seahawks game. So sometimes you like to look for excuses of like why they weren't better, but that wasn't even the problem. Jonny mentioned it, really bad awareness in coverage and no pass rush repertoire to speak of. Now, I think one of the reasons he went so high, yeah, obviously he was an athletic outlier, but the first thing you think about is for guys who are extremely fast as edge rushers is, oh, they're terrible against the run. And then one of the scouting reports about him was he was actually really good against the run. Mm-hmm. So to me, that probably led him to being overvalued on their board. I think he can be better in run defense than he showed last year. Like Jonny, I'm very skeptical of his pass rush outlook. Nick mentioned a few moves that he think he should add to the bag. There's two specifically that I'm honing in on is the ghost move. And for people who are unfamiliar, this is basically like you briefly shoot your arms out to try to get the tackle to engage, and then you just dip around them. And then the other is just like an inside counter because his agility is really good. And if he can beat the guy like inside, he's fast enough where it's hard to like get hands on him. Although one of the things is even if you are beating a guy to the inside, if they push you, that can completely throw you off of your pass rush track. So, it's going to be tough for him to become a starting level pass rusher. So, I view him as more of like that sub package guy. You can even bring him in as like an extra lineman, especially in these odd fronts where they have 5 linemen. Often you're going to see the weak side guy dropping into small little zones. And, when he was trying to mark guys down the field or getting depth on his zone drops, it was really looking bad. But if he can stay close to the line of scrimmage, it's like you can't mess up that bad. And then his athleticism can shine. So that's where I see him excelling. But overall, I'm also skeptical about him, but of course, wishing the best.
Yeah, I think if you want to know why he got drafted where he did, it's the ridiculous athleticism. I mean, guys his size wouldn't have been an edge rusher 20 years ago either, and that's a whole different thing. Defense is getting smaller and faster, but it's just incredible his speed, and if he can harness that and turn it into becoming a good pass rusher, obviously that's the goal, and you get the old adage, that you can't teach speed, and you can teach everything else, and we'll see if that's true. But like Eric mentioned, he's such a weird profile that he is such a small, fast guy who can't rush the passer and is a good run defender. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But he is a strong run defender, and maybe not like league-wide, but for his size, for sure, and definitely compared to, Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick last year, their run defense was awful. But one play that really showcases his athleticism that I'll throw up here, this is him off of the edge, and it's a read option play that the Cardinals run, and he's going to go over the top of the pulling tight end, which tells Kyler to pull the ball, and then he still gets a hand on Kyler, and he's not able to bring him down, but like there are very few edge defenders in the NFL that can go over the top of that tight end, commit as hard as Nolan Smith does, and still get out and get a hand on Kyler Murray. So there's athletic giftings that are there. But all of that said, you guys mentioned it, he can't rush the passer. I wrote in my scouting report last year, quote, he doesn't have much in the way of counter moves if he can't bend around the edge. And we didn't even really see him try to bend the edge very much. It was just lock out the arms, that power move that was never going to work. And I don't like how he was used by Smith, or I don't like how he was used by Sean Desai and by Matt Patricia. It really feels like his entire rookie season was wasted. In 4 years at Georgia, he had 135 total snaps in coverage, and he comes into the league, and he's raw. And I felt like you use this guy, you don't have a big need to play him right now. So just let him focus on one thing. Like, Nolan, our goal for you this year is to learn a cross-chop move. Our goal for you this year is to learn a ghost move, an inside spin move, whatever. We've got one move. That's what we're working on. We're going to put you in the game. You're going to throw that move 5 times a game, and we're going to see if we can get it down by the end of the year. Instead, we get him playing off-ball linebacker. We get him dropping into coverage. If you want a linebacker, just draft one. Like, don't draft an edge rusher in the first round.
You can do that?
Yeah, you could do that. Don't draft an edge rusher that dropped into coverage 135 times in his collegiate career and be like, hey, you're an off-ball linebacker this week, and next week we're going to put you back out on the edge. So I feel like his entire rookie season was mostly wasted because they threw way too much at a guy that was raw and needed to focus on one thing. And I think fans are going to have to be patient with that because I kind of expect from Nolan Smith this year what I expected last year, and that's that he's not going to play a lot. And if he can get one thing down, that's going to be good. And you can argue whether that's a wise investment of a first-round pick, and a lot of it depends on, how that develops down the road. But I don't think he has much of a role this season, honestly. It'd be nice if he's able to get out there, but I just don't really see it. I see the year 2 being what year 1 should have been for me. Eric, what do you have?
I have a British idiom for Jonny.
Yes.
When I saw they were playing, I believe it was like a penny front with 5 linemen, and he was the middle linebacker just alone against the Giants, they lost the plot. So I knew at that point that it was over. Yeah, you like that?
I didn't even know that was the British idioms. There you go. I thought that was
okay.
just a general phrase that you lot use as well. So that's another one that I had no clue about, which is great. I would just say as well, Shane, I'm not going to kill the guy. I feel like you were way more negative than I thought you two. I came in hard expecting you two to then bounce back against me, and no, you didn't. And Nick, I'll throw to you in a second if you mentioned you got a few points. I just think it is important to stay before we move on with Nolan. None of us are done with him. He's a rookie, and we've all mentioned how athletic he is. And sometimes players just develop. Coaching matters. It's a very cliche, but you can't teach athleticism. And there are things he can do that other players simply can't do. I just find it really interesting as a fan base how positive everyone is about him. And I think it's because he's such a good guy and he speaks really well in interviews. And I think he's really, really easy to root for. And don't get me wrong, I'm heavily rooting for him. I would much rather him become the best pass rusher in the world on my pre-draft scouting report, go up in flames. But I just didn't see it. And I think the scariest thing for me is going back to him dropping in coverage. I think he has to be like a hybrid player. I don't think he's going to be someone that's good at good at one specific thing. And if he can't learn how to drop in coverage, I feel like he's just a bit wasted. Nick, what did you want to add on that as well before we move on?
Yeah, I think things were a little unfortunate for him. I think expectations were sky high. And some of my videos that I've pointed out previously, I was going through and looking at things like just Twitter, preseason takes. People were thinking he was going to get 15 sacks. That's a rookie record. I don't even know if he had 15 sacks in college. People were saying he was going to get more sacks than Hassan Reddick. It's, I guess, because he's a first round pick. I don't know. I think sometimes we just got to temper expectations on rookies, and especially a player like Nolan Smith. When you look at how he played at Georgia, I think there were 7 first round edge rushers the year he was drafted. He had the second lowest amount of total pass rush snaps, and then you include that on his pass rush snaps, a third of the time he's dropping into coverage, a third of the time they were running stunts, which is I think he can. That's something we should see more this year with Fangio, and he can be a little bit better with. And then the other times, then, yes, he's rushing the passer. So even of his pass rush snaps, how many of them are true pass rush reps? This guy was a project really the whole time. And if you go into it with the expectations that he was a project and not expect him to come in here and be the day 1 starter, or even in year 2 be the guy getting the 3rd most reps, and be patient and understand what he can become, then things are a little bit more positive. But if you're expecting him to come in and just, I've seen some people think he's going to unseat Josh Sweat and get more snaps than him. Again, we're getting back into this thing where we're ready for that next new thing, and just give the guy time and let him develop and grow.
All right. Yeah. And like I said, I won't do it for time constraints. I could throw up several clips that I have on Twitter of Nolan Smith in run defense, because I do think that, he was good at what he should have been good at, based on what we saw in college. So I'm not killing the guy. I think his situation was terrible, and I hope to see him develop, moving forward. So let's move on to the other rookie that got some significant playing time. Unfortunately, he did end the season tearing his ACL in Week 18. That's probably going to see him start the year on the PUP list this year, but it's Sidney Brown. Again, this is another guy that the Eagles were drafting, they were catering to me last year. Sidney Brown was number 64 on my big board. I loved the player in college, and man, I loved watching him in the NFL. He was learning on the fly last year. He only played 22% of his snaps deep in college. 57% were in the box, 21 in the slot, so he had a lot of versatility. And the Eagles used him in the slot a little bit last year. He was good against the run, really kind of struggled in coverage. They used him some at deep safety, and so he was learning a lot of different things. But we can throw up some stats for him here. He had a really high broken tackle and missed tackle percentage at 13.3%, which jives with his college film. He plays with his hair on fire, and he comes downhill looking to light you up, and a lot of times that results in some exciting plays, like when he was flexing over Terry McLaurin. I think it was in week 4, and it results in a fair share of missed tackles too. But in a defense last year that lacked so much speed and so much intensity, I think he quickly became somewhat of a fan favorite. And so I love Sidney Brown. I was devastated when he tore his ACL. You lose that whole first off season. You're going to be, missing out on reps and training camp and things like that. That's obviously going to make his career arc a little harder to get back onto the field. But Nick, as you look at Sidney Brown, what he did as a rookie, obviously the Eagles go and add Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They draft Cooper DeJean, who some have speculated could play some safety as well. How do you see Sidney Brown fitting into a rotation later this year once he's healthy, and then moving forward with the team?
Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this whole DB room is going to be tough to figure out. I mean, it's not going to be until training camp where we really start to see where people fit in. And the thing is, if you look at ACL recoveries, it says the average is between 6 to 9 months. So he could be back around training camp, or he might not be back till October. It's going to be hard for a guy that, if he misses all of training camp, it's going to be hard for a guy at a position like safety, where so much about it is communication and making sure everyone else is correct and in the right spots. If he doesn't have any of that trust from Fangio because he hasn't been on the field to see it, he might be in a situation where he, again, is a sub-package player. I know a lot of people are thinking he's going to play over Reed. I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen this year. I think it might be a very similar thing of what we saw last year. But you touched on a lot of his traits. I mean, incredibly athletic. The guy looks like a Greek god. So maybe he comes back very early from his ACL injury. I mean, some guys just recover faster. But it's that attitude that he brings, what we needed last year and what we're going to need going forward again this year and years after. I'm extremely excited for the player that he can be. If there was a number of the plays, like in the Seahawks game, if he had made a couple of those plays, I bet we're talking about this guy completely different in terms of not the guy that's missing all these tackles, but this guy that's making big impact plays. He's like right there to making a lot of big impact plays. He just needs to finish it. And I'm not surprised with how he was used last year. I thought he was used how he should have been used because, like I was mentioning, there's just so much communication that goes on the back end. And you said he only played 22% of his snaps at deep safety. That's a different position than playing in the box or playing in the slot. And if going forward with this defense, I could see scenarios where he's like, if they want to play big nickel or big dime and against, 12 personnel or bigger personnel groupings, I think he might be a better fit than DeJean is at that role because he is just a bigger and even more physical player at that point in time. Now, I don't want to get into a thing where we're constantly rotating a bunch of players just based on are they in 12 personnel or are they in 11 personnel. You want to have some of that, continuity. But I thought he got a lot better as the year went along. I was pleasantly surprised at how good he was playing deep safety. There's a number of plays, like in the Cowboys game, he saved James Bradbury's ass by getting over top and preventing a wide open CeeDee Lamb touchdown. It's like, those are things that I love Reed Blankenship. I'm a Reed truther, but those are plays that Reed just probably isn't going to make just because he doesn't have that type of athleticism. His ceiling is really high, but it's really going to be about how does he take on to the nuances of playing deep safety, because there's a reason why a lot of slower players can succeed and be some of the best players at safety as opposed to other positions like corner. Like if you look at the all-pro players from 2022, Justin Simmons and Hufanga were both 4-6 players, but you know why they were so good? Because they can process so quickly and understand everything that's going on the field in front of them and get to the right spots. If Sidney figures that out, I mean, I think he has Pro Bowl level potential and potentially better than that.
All right. Eric, what are your thoughts on Sidney Brown, and do you perhaps have a nickname that you want to get out there for him?
Yeah, I coined him Crash Browndicoot because he is flying around the field. As Nick mentioned, he's often in right position. It was just probably just breaking down a little bit more conservatively to make the tackle because he was looking for the hit stick often. I do like him more in the box. Now, that's his pedigree. Like you mentioned about going back to college, he played that a lot more. So could he develop into a deep safety starting caliber? Sure. Now, the thing I would highlight specifically about him is we've predicted that Fangio will use a lot of big dime and like big nickel packages because the strength and depth of the team looks like it's the secondary. So you want to get those guys on the field. And just for those who are unfamiliar, that's basically in the big dime, that's going to be 3 safeties with 3 corners, and then nickels, just 3 safeties with 2 corners. And that's going to put him in position to play closer to the line of scrimmage. He's can be a quasi linebacker in those situations. Now, we've heard in training camp from beat reporters that he's been like very involved in kind of those discussions with the safeties about like, different coverage rules and checks, so much so that they specifically singled him out for making sure that he was like on his P's and Q's. So that's encouraging to me. I think he had the highest recorded GPS speed of like any defender the entire NFL last year. I didn't know he even had that long speed. So that kind of speaks to what Nick said about his potential. There's nothing really limiting him. He's very physical and he can be rangy and is instinctive. So if he just refines, some of the little weaknesses he has, like over aggressiveness, understanding route combinations so that he can play the deep safety position more effectively and just getting more experience in general there, I think he can be great. Although I think probably for the next year or two, to me, he's more of a sub-package player who's probably going to be in the 300 to 500 snap range.
Yeah, according to Next Gen Stats, on his interception return against the Cardinals, which let's not forget, the Eagles drafted him with the draft pick they were awarded for the Cardinals tampering with Jonathan Gannon. So the gift that keeps on giving. But he topped out at 21.52 miles per hour, which is faster than any Eagles ball carrier over the last 2 seasons. So he's got the speed. I do question, Jonny, he's basically the same height, the same weight, the same 40 time, the same play style as Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. How do those guys work together on the same field? Is there a role for them at the same time? Is Brown depth for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for now and an eventual replacement? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he might end up as depth. I really like Sidney Brown, but I'm sort of almost scarily similar to what Eric and Nick said in that I'm looking at my notes before the podcast I wrote down. Like, my concern with him is he a full-time player? So can he play split safety sort of every week? Do you even want him playing split safety a lot? Last year was really interesting because we saw him do lots of roles, and that's cool. But also it sort of proved the point that coverage in the slot is not his strength, and he's not going to end up in the slot. Whereas I think Chauncey is much more like he could play nickel cornerback tomorrow, whereas I don't think Sidney Brown can. But what we also saw was Sidney Brown's run defense from the slot was like a cheat code. Like, the guy had some run fits that were just absolutely insane. I wrote he's a little bit over-aggressive, so I think you mentioned the tackling stats. He's really inconsistent as a tackler. I think fans' perception of him, maybe casual fans, is that he's a really strong tackler because he hits really big and flies around the field. And yes, that's true. But at the end of the day, he missed too many as well. But I do think in general, like instinctively, he's a really, really good run defender. Like I said, like quite simply, I put in the bottom of my notes for my film review that I'm going to release over the next few weeks, is he looks like an athlete who deserves to be on the field in one way or another. Now, I don't really care how you do that. I actually really like the idea of playing him as like a dime linebacker type idea that Eric mentioned. I think you just get him there somewhere. It may be matchup specific. It may be it may be like it depends on who you're playing against. It may be you have a certain role you want for certain opponents. When Nick said that he really likes Reed Blankenship, I realized we really were similar about everything because I'm also a huge Blankenship fan. So I don't expect him to start this year. Like, I don't think he's going to be better than Blankenship as an every down safety. He's not going to be better than Chauncey as an every down safety. I think they're a little bit different, although they're similar body types. Sidney Brown is much more of a hybrid linebacker box safety, whereas Chauncey is much more of a safety who can cover over the slot and gives you more versatility that way. So I think Sidney Brown can just be a little bit of everything. I wish I saw him a little bit more at deep safety last year. Like, I think he's got a little bit of range to play single high that we didn't really get to see a lot of. I'd just like to have seen him play some more generic sort of split safety stuff, see him play a little bit of tricks coverage that we've seen Blankenship play the past few years, because I don't really know if he can do that yet. And as everyone knows, in Fangio's defense, that is obviously a huge part of it. But one thing he does have is he's obviously quick enough to get downhill in run defense. And we know that if there's been a killer of Fangio-style coaches around the league of late, it's been the inability for safeties to get downhill quickly. And basically, you look at the Chargers and what they've done under Staley, it's just been run defense that's killed them. So it could be that Sidney Brown is the perfect safety for a modern Fangio defense because of how relentless he is and how quick he is at getting downhill. So I think the future is very bright for Sidney Brown. I don't know if it will be this year. I think coming off the ACL, I think it may take time, but I think he's too good to not play. I think eventually he will find himself on the field one way or another. It may be 5 to 10 snaps one week. It may be 20 to 25 snaps another week, but I think he'll be a valuable asset this year. So I'm excited to see how his role develops. It may not be as a full-time player, and it may not even be that much this year coming off the ACL. But as I said, I'll summarize what I said earlier on. I think he's someone who deserves to be on the field one way or another, and I think it'd be pretty cool to see how that actually happens next year.
All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to throw out about Sidney Brown?
I'll add in this about his tackling. I know a lot of people, we have talked about he does miss a good amount of tackles. Just for, to give people a little hope that he can improve that. Jesse Bates was also a very similar player in that he missed a lot of tackles early in his career and coming out of college, very similar to Sidney Brown. And then he turned it around. So listen, these are, like we're talking about here, these guys are all rookies. Their books are not written yet. This is just the first chapter, and all these guys can improve. We just need to see that happen now.
All right. The last guy we'll mention, and this one will be much more brief because his snap count is much more lean. It's Moro Ojomo, who played 68 snaps on the defense. And Jonny, I know you loved Moro Ojomo. So lead us off here. What are your thoughts on Ojomo? Do you think he sees the field more in his second season?
Yeah, I think he will. I think off air we were talking before, and Nick mentioned similarly. So it's funny how much you remember stuff pre-draft. So I didn't obviously watch him. I'm not watching 7th round defensive tackles pre-draft, unfortunately. But obviously I watch every single draft prospect, and I'll be fully honest. Quite often when we get to UDFAs and 7th round picks, I can't really be bothered, but I do it because I essentially have to, and I have to write about it. Yes, it's a hobby, but it's also a job for me. And I just loved watching him. Like, I love his style of defensive tackle. I didn't really grade him, obviously, but I remember writing in my film review, I probably would have had around like a 4th round pick on him. And he went in the 7th. Now, I think he was late off the snap too often. His pass rushing was the reason why he fell. Like, there wasn't a lot of career snaps. He was pretty much a run defender. But he was just an awesome run defender in college, like really, really good. The ability to anchor, really good leverage, really good length, really good arm lengths to sort of help get off offensive linemen and make plays. Sometimes scouting can be overrated. Just go and watch highlights of this guy in college and you can see him make plays against the run. And then preseason came around and I was watching him and he's doing the same thing. He's getting off offensive lineman, he's disengaging, he's showing the ability to win against the run. Then he started getting a few snaps in the season, and I'm saying, yeah, it's the same guy. Like, it's always pretty nice when you watch a guy in college, you watch a guy in the preseason, then you watch the guy in the season, and you just see the same player. Like, did he flash huge potential as a pass rusher? Probably not. Is that something he can develop? Who knows? I think he was a pretty good athlete. I don't have his testing in front of me, but I seem to recall in college he tested. I don't think he was like a top athlete, but I'm pretty sure he tested pretty well.
He had a 9.17 relative athletic score.
Did he really? All right, better than I thought. So and there you go. So maybe there is potential there to develop. But yeah, that's what I'd say is just simply put, I feel pretty confident about him if he does end up as the Eagles sort of defensive tackle 4, a lot more early down snaps this year. I think he can do it. Like, I really do, because I feel pretty confident that the guy I watched in the NFL was the same guy I watched in college. And that always just gives me a little bit of like a sense of relief that this isn't just a one-off thing. It's not like he was just a matchup specific player last year. He didn't play a lot, but when he did, he looked like the guy that I watched in college that was a really good run defender. Nick, I know off air you sort of mentioned that you're a fan as well. So anything in particular you wanted to add, or just do you do you agree roughly with what I've said there?
Yeah, and we're running long, so I won't take too long. But I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, and there's a 3-play highlight out there that I've posted on Twitter of Ojomo against the Cardinals, and those are all showed off all of his strengths as a run defender, and what he was able to do. His body type is pretty interesting. He's 6'2", and he has like 34-inch arms, so he has a natural built-in leverage that you want from a defensive tackle, but his arms are really long. Like those play out to be a really good run defender, and you saw that show up. I will say this. He's a little bit like Milton Williams, where he's a better run defender than he is a pass rusher, and it makes me wonder, did they not extend Milton yet because they want to see him take that next step as a pass rusher? And if they don't, is Ojomo going to follow that same path? I think that's going to, a lot of people love Milton, so that sparked some backlash, but it does have me wonder a little bit. They're very similar, and if you'd rather go with the cheaper contract at that point in time, I could understand why they might let Milton test free agent market, and Ojomo can maybe fill in that similar type of role going forward. So I don't know about what are your guys' thoughts on that? Eric?
Yeah, when he first came out there during the regular season, I was like, wait, who is that? And then because he looks really small, he's only 6'2", about 290, and plays with a very low pad level. But then he was like, wow, this guy's pretty darn good. Now, here's the issue. I doubt he's going to get many snaps this year. It's a little bit of a misnomer about Fangio in terms of the fronts he's running. Primarily, they're going to be running 4-man fronts. And then when they go to the odd fronts, it'll be Milton Williams in there. So I think he's just going to be like a casualty in that sense, where I can't really envision him getting more than like 150 snaps at the absolute maximum. Injury obviously can change that equation, but it is a nice depth piece. And like Nick said, if they decide not to bring Williams back, he looks like a great successor for that skill set.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Ojomo's not a guy that I really watched in the draft process, but I thought he showed up at moments as a run defender and really limited reps, and I think he's a nice depth piece to have. I definitely wouldn't be building a lot of my plan I wouldn't be building a lot of my future plan around him, but he's a player that, you saw something in a small amount, and I'd like to see him play a little more this year, and maybe he can play himself into being, one of those key depth pieces instead of a guy that gets 100 snaps a year. And I think that's a good outcome for a guy like that as well. So I'm glad he's there. I fully expect him to make the roster and end up on the team and on the field a little bit. I don't think you're going to see this guy playing 200-plus snaps or anything, though. So anybody else?
Yeah, and again,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, these are very small sample sizes too. So I'm not, again, like you were saying, I'm not making rash decisions based on that very small sample size. But if we see this upcoming year that maybe he is taking a step forward and he's flashing and more playing time, I could see why we might be having a different conversation at the end of the year. But like you guys said, it's going to be hard for him to play more snaps than Milton and JD and Jalen Carter. So like a lot of these DBs, he might be a casualty of just the players in front of him going forward.
All right. Well, that is going to about do it here. I want to throw to a few comments, and then we will get out of here. We have Andrew on Facebook that chimed in and said, we're lucky to get all these Georgia Bulldogs that will be competing for championships for a decade. Go Philly Dogs. Tommy on YouTube said that we should do more collabs with the Philly Film Room, and I couldn't agree more. Loved having you guys on. Tim shares that same sentiment, says that these are his two favorite Philly football podcasts. And then Nikki on Twitch chimed in and said hello and wants to give a shout out to Nick. So got some love for Nick, got some love for the Philly Film Room podcast. And if you guys are not following their stuff, you definitely should be. I'm going to throw it around the horn to these guys and let them plug their stuff. But I've followed Nick for a long time. His video YouTube, that's kind of a dumb way to say that. But his YouTube content is top notch. Puts out short form videos, 8, 9, 10-minute videos that are top notch. I've interacted with Eric on Twitter for, a year or two now. Always great stuff. So I was excited when they teamed up for a podcast as well. So Nick, I'll throw it to you first here. Plug your stuff. Tell the people where they can find you, what you've got going on. The floor is yours, man.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Philly_films. Our YouTube is Philly Film Room. Really what we're doing through the rest of the offseason, we're kind of reviewing players like we're doing now and kind of previewing what they may be or how they may fit into this team going forward into next year. So Eric and I have been plugging away at that. Right now, all that content's on that YouTube channel, but we are planning to split that off into a separate YouTube channel. On top of that, I do have more in-depth, like the nerdy X's and O's stuff. If you love that, I'd recommend a good video to check out is my Bryce Huff video. I'd just like to state now I'm the president of the Bryce Huff fan club, so a lot of hope for him. But that's just some of the type of content that we have.
All right. Yeah, the X's and O's content is how I found Nick, and great stuff out there. Eric, what about you, man? What do you got going on? Where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Eagles X's and O's on Twitter. Recently, I've just been getting into a lot more scheme-oriented stuff, just really trying to study the offensive and defensive trends in the NFL, as well as doing some more like stat visualization stuff separate from our podcast. So if that's something that is interested to you, give me a follow. And I'm happy to like do some research and create stat visualizations. If you have any requests, I always invite that stuff.
All right, awesome. You guys be sure you check out their stuff. Jonny, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts you need to lay on the people?
No, I've done my classic. I left myself on mute. No, I think it's awesome. The good thing about Eagles film coverage and film coverage in general is that there's so many and there is so much to do with football. It's not like we're competing with these guys, which is awesome. Because you could listen to our podcast, you could listen to their podcast, and we'll see things differently because there's 101 things happening on every single play, and no one has the time to break down absolutely everything every week. And naturally, just as the seasons progress, off-season progresses, you'll get different opinions from different people. There's loads of great guys out there. I've always been incredibly jealous of Eric for his handle because he's got the great Eagles X's and O's, which must have been impossible to get. I can't imagine it's there for very long. But yeah, it was a pleasure to have you guys. We've both watched you for a long time. And yeah, I think it's cool there's people watching both of us because essentially, as I said, there's so many things you can do film-wise. You're sort of never really competing with each other. There's always, like, if people who want to learn about the game listen to both, I think hopefully they'll come away and learn something new from both podcasts. So yeah, I'll leave it to you to wrap things up, Shane, formally. But just thank you once again for you guys for joining us for an incredibly long podcast in June in the afternoon. But there's always something to talk about. So there you go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Be sure you check out their podcast. Get it on Spotify. You can get them on YouTube. Be sure you check out ours as well. Any ratings and reviews, that's not true. 5-star ratings and reviews are greatly appreciated, especially with the new Eagles Pin Pull Network feed to get it out there to people. So if you're watching and you didn't know it's on podcasting apps, go give it a subscription, blast that out to your friends. We would greatly appreciate it. So thank you guys for joining us in the middle of June for Rookie Reviews. We will catch you guys next week for another episode of On the Shane Page.